I don't like this film emulation power grade, or at least that's what I thought when I first started using it. But the more that I used CinePrint 35 and the more research that I did, the better this thing got. And I actually think that this might be maybe the most unique film emulation plugin or power grade on the market, simply because of this one aspect that Tom Bowles has added in. So let's get into how I use CinePrint 35 and why it might be the best one out there. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna let you decide. For our first shot, we're gonna go with something relatively neutral. All right, so we've got this shot here and we're gonna get like a hero frame. Okay, so I'm shooting this on actually the camera we're shooting on right now, which is the Fuji XS20. And so what I like to do before I do any power grade, if I'm using Fuji cameras, I'm gonna use Juan Malera's XH2S to Alexa LUT. Then we can come in here and we can use CinePrint 35 as if we have Alexa footage. The only trick is you have to append instead of apply. It adds the power grade at the end of the grade, so you still keep that first LUT that you got. I have another use case. I pretty much always append it because of something I'll explain later. You'll see that CinePrint 35 has some familiar film stocks that you can emulate, 500T and 250D. But I think the thing that makes CinePrint 35 the most unique is this 160T film stock, which is a Fuji film stock that I'm not seeing anyone else emulating. So we're gonna go ahead and append that here. At first, I didn't understand how this power grade was designed to work, but it's clear we've got, 4 main layers and they're very simple to understand. So you've got the first layer, which is your pre work. So this is gonna, think of this like it's what's happening in camera. Then you have your film emulation, which is happening right here. And then you've got your post emulation grading. So this is actually where the color grading is actually taking place, because all the other ones you're just balancing or the film emulation is actually happening. But it's when you get to this third layer that you actually start to grade. And then in the fourth, you get to choose your print profile and different things like that. I think when we think of it that way, it's actually pretty cool. If we want to have a less contrasty image coming into our film emulation, then we can do that. That gives you a lot more information in the midtones. And then we can also have a little bit of split toning. You can toggle those on or off as you please. And I like that Tom is setting up the power grade in such a simple way. So we don't really have to do anything to this middle thing right here unless we want some gate weave in our shot, which I'm not going to do for right now for the sake of my computer. But then in this little deal here is when we can start kind of actually grading the image. So I'm going to bring some contrast back into the image, and as you can see, we're getting to a decent look, but it's very, very warm. And that's because we haven't done anything with white balance yet. And the reason why we haven't done anything with white balance yet is because I like to get the contrast to a point where I like where it's at and then adjust the white balance from there, because contrast can affect the actual saturation of your image. So that's why I like to get that contrast in a good range where I like it, and then we will adjust the white balance. Now, if we select our offset wheel, then we can adjust that and get a good white balance that we like. Now I'm just doing this by eye, but you could totally, instead of doing that, undo that, you could totally just use the eyedropper tool. That's gonna give you a pretty solid white balance, but it's honestly not my favorite look. I prefer to kind of dial it in myself. But if you find that what your eye sees tends to not be true to maybe what the color actually is in the frame, like what you think is true white may actually be warmer or cooler than once you've exported it and looked at it for a second time. Then part of that may be because the environment that you're in has more warm or cool lights, and so that's shifting how your eye is interpreting white balance, which is a crazy thing that happens. Or it just may be because everyone's eyes see color slightly differently. And so for me, like, I've kind of graded enough images that I know that I like how my eye interprets the white point of an image. Now, I will frequently revisit the white balance in an image just to like make sure that I'm on the right track with it, but that's something you can totally do. And after getting enough reps of interpreting white balance with your eye, then it's way easier to do that. We have now done white balance. Exposure wise, I feel pretty good about where we're at. I mean, I don't even really feel like there's anything that needs to be done with this. I like the kind of brighter look that we're going for. We've got our highlights coming in at 896, which is a brighter look overall, but I'm cool with it. And then, you know, we've got this pastel node here, which is a cool node. It's kind of just lifting up all those shadows. If we wanted a deeper look, we could totally turn that off, and that's gonna even bring more contrast back into the image, which I think is just a fun little toggle you can have. We got this shadow tone, which is going to push the blue into those shadows even further. And I personally actually really like this additional shadow tone. You're getting a little bit of that with this print emulation. Actually, the print emulation is doing a ton, but it is gonna like do some color separation here. But I just like a little bit more blue in the shadows. Sue me. We can adjust this. And what's crazy is like, even though this looks like a very neutral shot, we can clearly see that like, oh, there's actually a more neutral zone that we could land in if that's what we're looking for. What I have found with my personal taste, and so much of color grading is taste, what I found with my personal taste is that having a little bit of like a warm kind of cast to the image at the end of the grade, I really, really like. So that's why I'm gonna keep this on and keep this kind of like, I guess, inviting look. I'm rarely looking for that perfectly true white in the whites in the color. So that's pretty much it. If we had some noise in the image, let's turn the grain off and look at the noise in the image. I mean, really, we don't. It's pretty soft, to be honest. Maybe I missed focus here. This is shot on the same lens that we're shooting on right now, the 7 Artisans 12mm. So yeah, that's gonna be pretty much it. So we'll turn the grain back on. One thing I do notice about the grain with this is that it appears to have a little bit of saturation in it. So what I might do is come in here and dunk and take out that saturation. This is a personal preference, but I just prefer for grain to not have saturation. And then we also have like a 4K grain as well. So if we're gonna be exporting 4K, we can throw on the 4K grain. If we're gonna be exporting in 1080, we can turn on the 1080 grain. But you boys can turn on the 4K grain, because why not? So this is our image here. This is where it's ended up. I honestly really, really like this. This 160T is gonna be very unique. I actually have graded this shot before, and I've opted for a 250D look. So I wasn't using Cineprint 35, but we're gonna go ahead and grade with the 250D look through Cineprint 35 and compare. So let me grab the still here, and then let's get to Cineprint, the 250D. So we got the tint curves that we want to throw in there. Bring our contrast up here, not too much, and we'll get that white balance dialed in. I feel like this is bringing the exposure a little too high, so I'm actually just going to pull the highlights down a little bit. I will say I don't like what's happening to his skin there, so I don't know what it is about it, but it's kind of like just the color that it's shifting to. Well, sometimes we can just over crank it and then we can just come back to normal. That feels like a good place to live. And then yeah, we've got, you know, I'm gonna come in here to the grain, do the same thing to the grain. We've got the 250D tones, this little green highlight tool, which is pulling greens out of the highlights, which I really like. I do like greens in the highlights, but that's more of a 500T look from what I understand. So it's kind of like counteracting that lean. Let's compare these grades. So if we plop this on here, this is our look that we just did, and this is the 160T. With enough skill and enough research, you can achieve either of these looks regardless of the fill emulation that you're using. But I do think it's cool that Tom is giving us this 160T look, because there's a lot of aspects to 160T that I'm learning about through Tom, and I think it's a really interesting film stock to emulate. We also have this 160T, and that is pretty unique compared to what else is on the market. I don't know of any other film emulation power grade or even plugin that's going to allow you to emulate 160T. So very cool that we can do that. And I just want to grade a couple more shots using this power grade. Something that's unique about Cineprint 35 is the way that it interprets saturation. Oh man, iced vanilla latte goes crazy. Okay, let's continue. I'm gonna use the 160T here. Holy moly, this is so sick. This is already looking amazing. Maybe, oh yeah, let's do this. This shot's actually a little bit better. So for this shot, I added a warm, like handheld, it's like a little like 6-inch light bar. I have a pool noodle on it. It's actually what is lighting up this wall over here. But I had that going, and it created a nice separation between the guys and the blue overall look of this whole deal. So we're gonna turn on this pre there and get a little split to get those blues a little bit darker. And then we will go to our contrast, pull that back down. Only thing I'm not liking here is how much our image is falling apart in their face. You can see very clear distinction. You got 3 different colors here. 1, 2, 3. I don't love that, which means we're probably overdoing it somewhere. You know, if we wanted to go with Film Unlimited, Film Unlimited is going to be a very desaturated look. And it's interpreting log C, and I need to adjust the raw tab here. That is one of the benefits of shooting Blackmagic, is we just changed to log C. You have a nicer roll off here between these colors. I know that there's a harsh edge here, and if I look closely, I can see that second edge, but it's definitely not as intense, even if we boost that saturation, or color boost, excuse me, which I overdid it so we can see it, but it's a lot less destructive. You are getting a little bit of crazy action right here, but that's just the nature of what I did with the color boost. So that may be a downfall of this that I actually have, I'm just discovering as we're using it. But let's go back to Cineprint 35 and see what we can do. But you know, I'm gonna make a bigger video about this, but this is one of those issues that you just find when you are using someone else's tools. You know, Tom has created these tools to emulate, you know, film and in the way that he wants. And so there may be certain use cases that don't really work. That's why I kind of collect a handful of different tools, so that depending on the use case, depending on the shoot that I'm doing, I can apply those tools as needed. For this specific shot, I just would not have used Cineprint 35 because of this stark color shift here. It just does not look pleasing to me, and it's pretty destructive. Now I'm gonna do a shot that actually people thought was graded with Cineprint 35. I had a guy message me, he goes, I know Cineprint 35 when I see it, and no shade to him, but it wasn't Cineprint 35. So I'm gonna go ahead and grade it with Cineprint 35 though, since we're already here. So, and one reason that I almost always append the node graph or Shift S to add a node beforehand is because right here we've got these pretty bright highlights, and if for some reason I needed to bring the exposure up and we start to clip those highlights, I need a way that I can save them. And probably the best way to save highlights and to just do almost raw control, even if you aren't shooting in a raw format, is through the color wheels, the HDR wheels. So if we come in here and we select our color space, we can choose the color space of our camera and the gamma of our camera. And then we're gonna have very true to camera controls. And so I can bring those highlights down however I want to. You have to be careful with this because our natural world has bright highlights. So you don't ever want to bring the highlights down too far, but I can keep them from clipping by using this. And it's going to be true to how the camera would interpret the highlights and the exposure in the first place. Contrast back in. I'll throw in the shadow tones because I just like it. And the green highlights, turn that off or turn it on so that we don't get green highlights. We get more neutral highlights. But what's crazy about this is that this almost looks exactly like the original grade that I did. Funny enough, I used Film Unlimited for that grade. You can also just throw on this 160T, which I think is the most unique part of this, and get definitely, I would say, a unique look. Bring the contrast back into the image. And now, I mean, bring the exposure up a bit. This is different and this looks good. To me, where Cineprint 35 really stands out is the 160T look. I think that it's always going to create just an amazing and unique look because people aren't using 160T film emulation. So if you want to do film emulation, but you don't want it to look like everyone else, I would look into Cineprint 35 and I would particularly use the 160T. I do think that, you know, there's other ones that you could use that are also going to give a relatively unique look. This 160T is a standout. I mean, this image right here, very cool, very, you know, even if we have the pastel in there, like it's a really, really sick image. I could totally get behind using 160T on everything. In fact, this video is probably graded with 160T. Yeah, I'm just committing to you now that I'm going to grade this image with 160T because it's a very, very nice image. So that's Cineprint 35. It's a power grade that I didn't like at first, but I'm learning to love, and particularly the 160T stock that exists in this power grade is one of my favorites in terms of just film emulation as a whole. So I think it's definitely something that you should check out. And if you want a power grade that's going to give you all of the things that are so popular, all the looks that are so popular, like 500T and 250D, but also have the ability to, you know, jump out there a little bit, do something different and use a film stock that no one's using, Cineprint 35 is definitely the move. And I think that with the simplicity that Tom sets it up with, you have a very clear picture of what you need to do, how you need to modify the image, how you can modify the image. And there's also some stuff that I didn't touch on that is a part of this power grade, how he uses the log wheels. And so if you want a more in-depth explanation of Cineprint 35, obviously Tom is making videos about that on his channel, so you can check that out. And if you want to see my thoughts on Cineprint 16 or a couple of other film emulation power grades, you can check out this playlist here. But thank you so much for watching. And if you found this video helpful, I would love it if you'd subscribe because I'm just out here making YouTube videos trying to help you make better films. So see you next time.